treating us like we're infants. A babysitter.
I, for one, would feel absolutely humiliated to be sat for.
So would I.
Have you ever wondered what happened to the Brady Bunch kids after their show ended? They actually got their own sitcom, and it was a complete train wreck that vanished after only 10 episodes. We're about to explore that disaster and 19 other one-season wonders from the 70s and 80s that time has tried to forget. 1. The new Andy Griffith Show. Many people are crazy about the Andy Griffith Show. It was a wholesome, funny, and beloved series that made Andy Griffith a household name as the calm and wise Sheriff Andy Taylor. After that show ended, and after his other successful show, Mayberry RFD, you would think anything with his name on it would be pure gold. Well, you'd be wrong. In 1971, he came back to TV with a show called, you guessed it, The New Andy Griffith Show. The idea was simple. This time he wasn't a sheriff, but the mayor of a similar small town in North Carolina called Greenwood. He had a wife, kids, and a whole new cast of quirky townspeople around him. You see, the network, CBS, was trying to recreate that old Mayberry magic. The problem was, it felt like a copy of a copy. It was like getting a hamburger that looked just right, but had no flavor. What many overlooked is that audiences had moved on. The world was changing, and this gentle, slow-paced humor felt a little dated. The show was put up against Hawaii Five-0, a super popular and exciting cop show, and it got crushed in the ratings. After just 14 episodes, the network pulled the plug. It was a quiet end for a show that tried to bring back a feeling that was already a memory. It's tough when a legend stumbles. But what about a show that tried to bring back not just one legend, but an entire beloved TV family, only to find out that you really can't go home again? 2. Make room for Granddaddy Years. Before Andy Griffith's new show, another TV giant tried to make a comeback. His name was Danny Thomas, and in the 50s and 60s, he starred in a hugely popular show called Make Room for Daddy. It was a classic family sitcom that ran for over 300 episodes. After it ended, Danny Thomas became a powerful TV producer, helping create hits like, yep, The Andy Griffith Show. But in 1970, he decided to get the old band back together. He launched Make Room for Granddaddy, which brought back almost the entire original cast. In the new story, his character, Danny Williams, was now a grandfather. His kids were grown up, and he was dealing with a new generation. It sounded like a can't-miss idea, right? The thing nobody tells you is that nostalgia can be tricky. While it was nice to see the old faces, the jokes and stories felt like they were stuck in the past. It was like finding your favorite childhood toy, but you're too old to play with it anymore. The show wasn't bad, but it just didn't feel fresh or exciting. The world had changed since the original show, and this new version just felt out of step. It lasted for one 24-episode season before being canceled. Trying to revive a classic is a huge gamble, but it's an even bigger gamble when one of the biggest movie stars in the entire world decides to try his luck with a weekly sitcom for the very first time. 3. The Jimmy Stewart Show. Let's be clear, Jimmy Stewart wasn't just a star, he was a legend. He was the hero of amazing movies like It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He was a true Hollywood icon, known for playing honest, everyday heroes. So when it was announced in 1971 that Jimmy Stewart was going to star in his very own sitcom, it was a massive deal. It was like finding out the president was going to host a game show. The show was called simply The Jimmy Stewart Show. He played a small-town college professor named Jim Howard. The main gimmick of the show was that he and his wife were living with their son and his family, including their 8-year-old grandson. To make things even crazier, another professor at the college had an accident and was staying with them too. It was a house packed with people and wacky situations. But not all things are what they seem. The show had a fatal flaw. Jimmy Stewart's character would often break the fourth wall, meaning he would talk directly to the audience at home, explaining what was happening. This might sound cool, but it made the show feel awkward and slowed down the comedy. People loved Jimmy Stewart, but they didn't love the show. To put it mildly, the ratings were a disaster. It was canceled after just one season, proving that even the biggest movie star on the planet can't guarantee a TV hit. Having a big star wasn't enough, but what about having a completely charming and magical idea? The next show had a concept that seemed destined for success, starring two people who were perfect for their parts. 4. Nanny and the Professor Long. Before Mary Poppins returned to the big screen, there was a TV show with a very similar magical vibe. It was called Nanny and the Professor, and it was pure charm. The show was about a handsome, brainy professor named Harold Everett, who was a single dad trying to raise 3 rambunctious kids. He was completely overwhelmed. Then a miracle arrives on his doorstep. Her name is Phoebe Figalili, but the kids just call her Nanny. She's a beautiful Englishwoman with a twinkle in her eye, and just maybe some magical powers. She never admits to being magical, but strange and wonderful things always seem to happen when she's around. Things get fixed by themselves. Animals seem to understand her, and she always knows exactly what to do. The show was sweet, gentle, and really popular with families. The actors, Richard Long and Juliet Mills, had amazing chemistry. So why did it only last for one full season and part of another? It's a bit of a mystery. The ratings were pretty good. The most likely reason is that the network, ABC, decided to change its schedule in a big way. They moved the show to a different night, where it had to compete against more popular shows. It was a bad move. That cost the show its audience, and this magical little gem disappeared from the airwaves. It's a shame when a good show gets canceled for business reasons, but our next show was groundbreaking in a different way. It was based on a hit movie and featured a mostly black cast, something that was still very rare in 1970. 5. Barefoot in the Park. The name Neil Simon is a big deal in the world of plays and movies. He wrote tons of hilarious hits, and one of his most famous was Barefoot in the Park. It was a huge hit play and then a huge hit movie starring Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. The story is about a young couple, Paul and Corey, who are complete opposites. He's a serious, buttoned-up lawyer, and she's a fun-loving, free spirit. They move into a tiny apartment in New York City and have to figure out how to live together. In 1970, ABC decided to turn this hit into a sitcom. But they did something really important and forward-thinking. They cast black actors in the lead roles. The wonderful Scoey Mitchell and Tracy Reed played the young couple. This was a big step for television, presenting a modern, funny black couple as the stars of their own show. So what went wrong? The thing nobody tells you is that there was serious trouble behind the scenes. The star, Scoey Mitchell, was not happy with the show's producers and writers. He felt that the stories weren't funny enough and that they didn't understand the characters. There were a lot of arguments, and to put it mildly, the work environment was not a happy one. Because of all this fighting, the network decided to cancel the show after only 12 episodes. It was a sad end for a show that had so much promise and was trying to do something new. Creative fights can sink a show fast. But sometimes a show fails for a much simpler reason. People just don't think it's funny, even when it stars one of the funniest men alive. 6. The Tim Conway Show. If you've ever seen the Carol Burnett Show, you know that Tim Conway was a comedy genius. He was famous for making his co-stars, especially the great Harvey Korman, laugh so hard they would ruin the sketch. The man was comedy gold. Before he became a legend on that show, he tried to launch his own sitcom in 1970. It was called, you guessed it, The Tim Conway Show. He played Tim Spud Barrett, the clumsy, bumbling pilot of a tiny one-plane airline called AAA Airlines. The airline was run by a cranky boss and his equally cranky sister. Every week, Spud and his co-pilot would get into some kind of silly mess, usually because of Spud's complete incompetence. Sounds like a perfect setup for Tim Conway's style of physical comedy, right? But for some reason, it just didn't work. What many overlooked is that Tim Conway was at his best when he was surprising other actors and playing off of their reactions. In his own show, he was the center of attention, and some of the magic was lost. The show felt a little predictable. It was canceled after only 13 episodes. Luckily for all of us, this failure freed him up to join the Carol Burnett Show, where he became an absolute legend. Sometimes a star is better as part of a team. The next show also featured a rising star, but this one was a teen heartthrob whose real-life fame was part of the problem. 7. Getting Together. In the early 70s, many people were crazy about a show called The Partridge Family. It was about a family who formed a pop band, and its biggest star was the teen idol, David Cassidy. The producers of that show wanted to create another hit just like it. So, they introduced a new character on The Partridge Family named Bobby Conway, played by a handsome young actor and singer named Bobby Sherman. Bobby Sherman was a huge teen magazine star at the time. The plan was to use his popularity to launch a new show. That show was called Getting Together. It was about his character, Bobby Conway, and his nerdy songwriting partner, Lionel, who were trying to make it big in the music business. Each episode would feature them trying to write a hit song, getting into funny situations, and of course, Bobby would sing a song. The problem was, the show felt like a cheap copy of The Partridge Family. The stories were thin, and the main reason to watch was just to see Bobby Sherman. The thing nobody tells you is that a show needs more than just a famous face to succeed. It needs good writing and interesting characters. Getting Together didn't have enough of either. It got moved around the schedule, the ratings dropped, and it was canceled after just 14 episodes. Trying to copy a hit formula is a risky business. But what if you took two big stars and put them in a show about escaping that very formula, the boring suburban life so many other sitcoms were about? 8. The Good Life. Larry Hagman would later become world famous as the villainous J.R. Ewing on the soap opera Dallas. But back in the 60s, he was known for the magical sitcom I Dream of Jeannie. After that show ended, he wanted to do something completely different. He teamed up with the wonderful actress Donna Mills for a sitcom called The Good Life. The premise was really interesting and ahead of its time. They played a regular middle-class American couple named the Millers who decide they are sick of the rat race. They are tired of working hard, paying bills, and keeping up with their neighbors. So they quit their jobs and take new jobs as a butler and a cook for a super rich family. Their plan is to work for a year, save up a ton of money, and then retire and do whatever they want. It was a clever idea about rejecting the normal way of life. But here's the kicker. The audience just didn't connect with it. Maybe the idea of wanting to be servants, even for a good reason, seemed strange to people. The show was also put in a tough time slot. It struggled to find viewers and was canceled after only 15 episodes. Larry Hagman would have to wait a few more years to find the role that would make him a global superstar. That show was about a team trying to beat the system. Our next show was about a team trying to uphold the system, a pair of bumbling cops starring a comedy legend. 9. The Partners' Don Adams was a TV icon. For years, he played the hilarious secret agent Maxwell Smart on the classic sitcom Get Smart. He was known for his unique voice and his perfect comedic timing. After that show ended, he returned to television in a new sitcom called The Partners. This time, he wasn't a spy, but a bumbling police detective named Lenny Crook. His partner was a serious, by-the-book detective played by Rupert Cross. They were a classic odd couple, the goofy cop and the straight man, who somehow managed to solve crimes despite Lenny's constant mistakes. The show was created by the same people who made Get Smart, so it had a similar silly slapstick style of humor. It seemed like a recipe for success. Don Adams, back in a goofy role with a solid partner. But not all things are what they seem. The show was put on Saturday nights, a time when fewer people were watching TV. It was also considered by some to be a little too silly. While Get Smart was a clever parody of spy movies, The Partners was just a goofy cop show, and it didn't feel as special. It was canceled after 20 episodes, sending Don Adams looking for his next big hit. Silly humor can be a tough sell. Fast forward a decade, and we find another show that tried a very similar kind of silly humor, and while it failed at first, it would eventually become one of the most beloved comedies of all time. 10. Police Squad. If you've ever laughed at the Naked Gun movies, you have this TV show to thank. Police Squad was a sitcom created by the same geniuses behind the movie Airplane. It starred the wonderfully serious and deadpan actor Leslie Nielsen as Detective Frank Drebin, a clumsy cop who always solved the case by accident. The show was a masterclass in ridiculous non-stop jokes. There were sight gags in the background of every scene. The characters would say completely absurd things with a perfectly straight face. For example, every episode's title was announced on screen, but the narrator would always say a completely different title. It was brilliant, fast-paced, and unlike anything else on TV. So, why in the world was it canceled after only 6 episodes? The thing nobody tells you is that the show might have been too smart for its own good. The head of the network famously said the reason it failed was that you had to watch it to laugh. He meant that you couldn't just listen to it from the kitchen, you had to pay close attention to get all the visual jokes. In the 80s, that was seen as a bad thing, but the show was so beloved that a few years later, they turned it into the blockbuster movie, The Naked Gun, and Frank Drebin became a comedy icon. It was the ultimate revenge for a show that was canceled way too soon. It's amazing when a canceled show gets a second life. But what about a show that featured a future comedy superstar in his very first leading role, a young man who would one day become one of the biggest movie stars on the planet? 11. The Duck Factory. Before he was Ace Ventura, The Mask, or The Grinch, a young Canadian comedian named Jim Carrey was just trying to get his big break. That break came in 1984 with a sitcom called The Duck Factory. It was his very first leading role in an American production. The show was set in a small, run-down animation studio in Hollywood that produced a popular cartoon called The Dippy Duck Show. Jim Carrey played a young, innocent animator named Skip Tarkenton, who moves to Hollywood to follow his dreams. After the head of the studio suddenly passes away, Skip is unexpectedly put in charge of the whole wacky crew of artists and writers. This was a chance for America to see the young Jim Carrey's amazing talent for physical comedy and creating funny characters. He was clearly a star in the making. But the show itself was just okay. It was a pretty standard workplace sitcom, and the stories weren't very memorable. To put it mildly, the show didn't know what to do with a comedic tornado like Jim Carrey. The network canceled it after 13 episodes. It would take a few more years and a spot on the sketch comedy show In Living Color for Jim Carrey to become the superstar we know today. It's wild to see a huge star in their early days. But what about a show that starred the undisputed queen of television, a legend so big that her failure was one of the most shocking moments in TV history? 12. Life with Lucy Lucille Ball is arguably the most important and influential woman in the history of television. I Love Lucy is a timeless masterpiece. Her later shows, The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, were also huge hits that ran for years. She was the queen of TV comedy. For 25 years straight, from 1951 to 1974, she was starring in a hit sitcom. After a long break from weekly TV, she decided to make a triumphant return in 1986 with a new show called Life with Lucy. She was 75 years old at the time, but still had her amazing energy. In the show, she played a widowed grandmother named Lucy Barker, who inherited half of her late husband's hardware store. The other half was owned by his serious business partner, played by her longtime co-star Gail Gordon. The comedy came from her wacky ideas clashing with his grumpy personality. It sounded like a classic Lucy setup. But the thing nobody tells you is that the world had changed. The gentle slapstick humor that made her a star felt dated and out of place in the 80s. The jokes felt forced, and watching an elderly Lucy get into the same old crazy situations just didn't work for the audience. The show got terrible reviews and even worse ratings. It was canceled after only 8 of its 13 episodes were shown. It was a heartbreaking end to the TV career of a true legend. Seeing a legend fail is tough. The next show also featured a young, rising star who was known for being a bit of a troublemaker, and they built a whole show around that personality. 13. It's Your Move. In the mid-80s, a young actor named Jason Bateman was becoming a familiar face on television. He was known for playing smart aleck, charming characters. In 1984, he got the lead role in a sitcom that was perfect for him, a show called It's Your Move. Bateman played Matthew Burton, a teenage scam artist. He was a brilliant, smooth-talking kid who was always running some kind of clever scheme, like selling exam answers at school or fixing a raffle. He lived with his older sister and his mom. The main conflict of the show came when a new guy moved in next door, a serious writer named Norman, who started dating Matthew's mom. Norman was the only one smart enough to see through Matthew's tricks, and they were constantly trying to outsmart each other. The show was clever, funny, and Jason Bateman was fantastic. It developed a small but very loyal following. So why did it get canceled? You see, the network got nervous. They thought the main character was a bad role model for kids. They were worried about a show where a teenager who lies and cheats was the hero. They made the writers tone down the character, making him less of a schemer. This took away what made the show special. The ratings dipped, and it was gone after 18 episodes. Worries about role models can change a show. But what about a show that was a spin-off of a popular sitcom, featuring a group of young women who were, quite literally, models? 14. Living Dolls. Who's the Boss was a massive sitcom hit in the 80s. It starred Tony Danza and Judith Light. On that show, there was a character named Samantha who had a friend named Charlie, a young model trying to make it in New York City. The producers decided to give this character her own spin-off show. The show was called Living Dolls. It was about Charlie, who moves into a house with 3 other teenage models and their den mother, who runs the modeling agency. They were all trying to navigate the tough world of fashion while also dealing with normal teenage problems. It was meant to be a fun, lighthearted show for a young audience. What many overlooked at the time was the show's incredible cast of future stars. The 4 young models were played by Leah Remini, who would later star in The King of Queens, and a very young Halle Berry, who would go on to win an Oscar and become a massive movie star. But even that amazing talent couldn't save the show. It was criticized for being silly and for its thin plots. The ratings were terrible, and it was canceled after only 12 episodes. It's now remembered as a fun piece of trivia, the forgotten show where Halle Berry got her start. Future stars can't always save a weak show. Our next sitcom was also based on a popular property, this time a hit movie about the challenges of being a modern working mom. 15. Baby Boom. In 1987, the movie Baby Boom, starring Diane Keaton, was a big hit. It was about a high-powered, career-driven business executive named J.C. Wiat, whose life is turned upside down when she inherits a baby girl. She tries to balance her demanding job with motherhood, and the movie was both funny and heartwarming. Hollywood loves to turn hit movies into TV shows, so a year later, the sitcom version of Baby Boom arrived. The TV show picked up right where the movie left off. J.C. had quit her big city job and moved to a farmhouse in Vermont to raise the baby and start her own baby food company. The role of J.C. was taken over by the talented actress Kate Jackson, who was famous from Charlie's Angels. The show had the same charming idea as the movie. But not all things are what they seem. The TV version lost some of the movie's magic. It felt slower and less funny. It was a pleasant little show, but it didn't have the spark that made the movie a hit. It struggled to attract viewers and was canceled after just 13 episodes. It was another case of a great movie idea that just didn't quite work as a weekly TV series. From a baby boom to a Brady boom. Our next show tried to answer the question everyone was asking. What happened to the Brady kids when they grew up? 16. The Brady Brides. The Brady Bunch is one of the most iconic sitcoms ever made. Even though it ended in 1974, it lived on for decades in reruns, and people never got tired of the blended family. So in 1981, the network decided to bring them back. But instead of the whole family, this new show would focus on the two oldest daughters, Marcia and Jan. The show was called The Brady Brides. It launched with a big TV movie called The Brady Girls Get Married, where Marcia and Jan have a double wedding, marrying two goofy guys. The sitcom then followed the two couples as they all decide to buy a house and live together. Marcia, the perfectionist, and Jan, the insecure one, were now married and had to deal with each other and their new husbands under one roof. The thing nobody tells you is that this was a really weird idea. The comedy was supposed to come from the fact that Marcia's husband was a slob and Jan's husband was a stuffy professor. They were complete opposites, just like their wives. But the jokes were lame and the whole situation felt forced. Fans of the original show tuned in at first out of curiosity, but they quickly tuned out. The show was canceled after only 10 episodes, proving that sometimes it's best to leave a classic show in the past. A show about living with family can be tough. But what about a show where you live with a ghost who happens to be a glamorous movie star? 17. Jennifer Slept Here. The 80s had some pretty strange sitcom ideas, and Jennifer Slept Here is definitely one of them. The show was about a family who moves from New York City to a house in Beverly Hills. Soon after they move in, the teenage son, Joey, discovers that the house is haunted. But this isn't a scary ghost. It's the ghost of Jennifer Farrell, a glamorous and famous movie star who used to live in the house. She is played by the beautiful actress Ann Gillian. Jennifer can only be seen and heard by Joey, so he's the only one she can talk to. She acts like a ghostly aunt, giving him advice on girls, school, and life, all while causing some funny supernatural trouble. It was a cute and silly idea, a bit like a ghostly version of I Dream of Jeannie, but the show was, to put it mildly, not very good. The jokes were cheesy, and the situations were predictable. It was put on the Friday night schedule, which was often called the death slot because it was so hard to get good ratings there. The show lasted for 13 episodes before Jennifer and the show itself faded away for good. A ghost is a weird roommate, but the girls in our next sitcom had to deal with something even scarier. World War II. 18. Good Time Girls. Imagine a show like Laverne and Shirley but set during the 1940s. That was the basic idea behind Good Time Girls. The show was set in Washington, D.C. during World War II. With so many men away fighting in the war, the city was filled with young women who had come to work in government jobs. The sitcom focused on three women who share a single room in a crowded boarding house. There was Edith, the serious one, Betty, the boy-crazy one, and Loretta, the naive one from the country. They all worked at the same government office and were trying to navigate life, love, and work during a very dramatic time in history. The show also starred Annie Potts, who would later become a big star in Designing Women and the Ghostbusters movies. The show had a really unique setting and a talented cast. But here's the kicker. The producers of Laverne and Shirley, who were some of the most powerful people in comedy, were also behind this show. They tried to use the exact same formula. Two funny women, physical comedy, and a historical setting. but it just didn't catch on. The show felt like a copy, and it couldn't escape the shadow of the much more popular show it was trying to be like. It was canceled after 13 episodes, from Good Time Girls to A Good Time Car. Our final show is about a very famous vehicle with a mind of its own, a little car that was a huge movie star. 19. Herbie, the Love Bug. Everybody knows Herbie. He's the little Volkswagen Beetle with the number 53 on the hood who is alive and has his own personality. The movies starring Herbie, like the Love Bug, were massive hits for Disney. They were fun, family-friendly adventures. In 1982, Disney decided it was time for Herbie to get his own TV show. The sitcom was called simply Herbie, the Love Bug. In this version, Herbie is won by a young man named Jim Douglas, played by Dean Jones, who was the star of the original movie. Jim opens a driving school with his clumsy partner. Herbie, of course, gets involved in all sorts of wacky situations, from foiling bank robbers to helping people fall in love. But there was a huge problem. The thing that made the Herbie movies so special was the amazing car chases and stunts. A weekly TV show in the 80s just didn't have the budget to do that kind of action. So instead of exciting races, the show had to rely on simple, silly stories. It took away the most exciting part of Herbie's appeal. The show felt slow and cheap, and it was canceled after only 5 episodes, sending the little car back to the garage until his next movie appearance. From talking cars to ghostly movie stars, these shows prove that in the world of television, nothing is guaranteed. Not a big star, not a hit movie, and not even a magical nanny can promise you'll make it to season 2. They may be forgotten, but they are a fascinating part of TV history, a reminder of the wild chances and spectacular failures that happen every year in Hollywood.